Hello, friends. Welcome to the Tim and April Show. I am Tim Whitaker.
And I'm April Ajoy.
We got a lot to get to in this episode. A lot's going on in the world, and we want to talk about it. Shocker alert. If you're new to the channel, welcome in. April and I are two former Christian fundamentalists who were Christian nationalists, and now we are still very much Christian, but not in the Christian nationalist sense. In fact, April, you wrote an entire book detailing your journey.
Sure
Is that
did.
correct? Yeah, you did.
I absolutely did. Called Star Spangled Jesus. You can get it wherever books are sold.
I love that. I love that. So make sure to give this video a like, subscribe to the channel. If you're listening on podcast, thank you so much. Make sure to give this show a rating and a review, all the things. Today, we want to talk about a person named Doug Wilson, who April, we've covered him a decent amount on the show, but given his access to power, I think that it's really worth doing a deeper dive into who he is, because there are some clips that we're going to play that I don't think most people are even aware of regarding things that he said. And the fact that he is, involved in government affairs should be, a very alarming scenario.
Yeah, and by involved in governor affairs, it was just a few weeks ago that Pete Hegseth had him to the Pentagon to pray.
Yes.
In front of all of the service members. And Pete Hegseth, who we've also talked about at length, who's our Secretary of War, because they changed it. The President of Peacetime changed it to the Department of War. Anyway, he basically, Doug Wilson is Pete Hegseth's pastor.
Yeah.
And Doug Wilson has openly said that he is a Christian nationalist, which is different than a lot of Christian nationalists today, because I do think there is an important distinction. Like, you and I were formerly Christian nationalists, but we would have never called ourselves that because we just believed we were being good Christians, and because there's a lot of overlap between Christian nationalism and everyday white evangelicalism. And there are a lot of people that would fall under the umbrella of Christian nationalism that would vehemently deny that they are Christian nationalists. We are in that camp. Doug Wilson is not in that camp. He is one of those few people, and there's a growing number of them that are openly Christian nationalists, that would openly say they believe America needs to be a Christian nation, that we need to uphold a biblical patriarchy, that women need to be in the homes. They are the people that are openly advocating to repeal the 19th Amendment and take away a woman's right to vote. So there's a spectrum when it comes to Christian nationalism. The danger of the Doug Wilson's types is that they're more extreme.
Yes.
And he has high access to governmental power in our nation right now.
Yeah, no, that's correct. So Doug, for those who don't know, Doug Wilson comes out of the reform side of evangelicalism. He's been around for a very long time. I remember growing up as a kid and hearing the name Doug Wilson here and there, but he was always kind of seen as fringe. He started his own denomination called the Communion. What is it called? Communion of Reformed Evangelical Churches. And honestly, like, he got to some hot water theologically over the years for just having beliefs that weren't even they were just controversial. But he was always tolerated in these spaces. In fact, John Piper, the guy that we talked about last week on the show, had Doug Wilson at one of his conferences, which at the time was seen as pretty controversial. So Doug was someone who was already seen as fringe, wrote some wild books that we're going to get into, a few of them, but was still allowed and kind of seen as the crazy uncle that's still family. Compare that, though, to someone like Rob Bell, April. Rob Bell was this evangelical pastor that kind of blew up on the scene. He was a great author, but he was always kind of seen as more, quote-unquote, progressive by evangelical standards, right? And he wrote a book called Love Wins, and in that book, he questioned in one chapter of the book if hell maybe isn't forever and if maybe ultimately love wins. Like, maybe God reconciles all people to himself, which honestly, there is historic Christian theology for that perspective. Maybe the most infamous person right now is David Bentley Hart, who writes about this. But he was quickly kicked out. Quick. I mean, John Piper, our guy again, right, wrote on Twitter, famously, farewell, Rob Bell. And Rob was kicked out. I mean, I got a pamphlet in my church bulletin to avoid this book by Rob because it's heresy. But Doug Wilson, maybe not our favorite, but he's okay. He's not that bad, So that's kind of where Doug comes from.
We also need to say, too, Rob Bell's book, Love Wins, I finally read it once I started deconstructing because it was considered contraband, basically. It was forbidden text to read. Yeah. And I remember when I read it, I was so surprised because he doesn't actually make a declarative statement on hell not existing. He's merely asking the question, could an all-loving God who loves us unconditionally exist within the context of an eternal conscious torment that would burn people alive forever? Does that make sense? He's literally just asking a question, and he's kind of exactly. I don't know. I don't know if it does. I think it's worth discussing. And that was what got him blacklisted.
I mean, his famous quote in that book is, does God get what God wants? Which honestly, a thought-provoking question, right? If God is all powerful, all good, all loving, why couldn't God save people in the afterlife as well, right? I mean, it's not a bad question to ask. But yes, it was contraband. It was do not read. So I think, let me just share one quote from Doug Wilson that we've shared a couple times, but I have a more truncated version of it just about slavery, because this is important. Remember, Doug wrote a book with a white supremacist named Steve Wilkins. He was the founder of the League of the South. And this is in the 90s. So John Piper, your evangelicals know about Doug Wilson's writings. Here's just one small quote. This is from Examining in Moscow. They tracked Doug Wilson. Doug writes in this book in 1996, slavery as it existed in the South was not an adversarial relationship with pervasive racial animosity. It was a relationship based upon mutual affection and confidence. There has never been a multiracial society which has existed with such mutual intimacy and harmony in the history of the world. Think about this. This guy can say this, and that's not that problematic. It's not our favorite, but it's not problematic. Rob Bell suggests that all people are saved by God in the end, potentially, maybe, and he is kicked out of the white evangelical world. And honestly, April, looking back now, I'm like, that is crazy.
It's so crazy. The further I get away from that world, the more so much of it is just absolute bonkers, bizarro world.
Right, wait a second, guys. You were afraid that God was too loving. So that was heresy and that was your red line. But talking about how maybe slavery was a harmonious, racially harmonious life. And by the way, Doug in the rest of that quote says that slave life was to the slave a life of plentiful and health and good. He really talks it up. That isn't a red flag.
I mean, to be fair, when I was 19, I wrote a little book. In it, I condemned Christians who were too nice.
Okay, I hear you on that, but would you have, if you knew about that quote from Doug Wilson, even fundamentalist, April, would you really have been I can tolerate that?
No.
Right. That's what is so wild to me. These are the people who raised me in Sunday school. Some of them were passing around Doug's stuff. Not that book, but they were passing around Doug Wilson. I don't get it. Yeah. I don't get it. I don't get it. Okay, one clip. I did want to play a clip that happened in 2001, just to give you guys an example of how extreme, even back then, Doug Wilson was. So, this background, I'll give context for this background in a minute. It's Doug Wilson holding a flamethrower. We'll get to that later on.
Very normal.
I needed a background for this audio because there's no video of it. So Doug Wilson, after 9/11 happened, Doug Wilson preached a sermon, and this is maybe a week or two after the towers get hit. I want you all to hear what Doug said about 9/11, and then April, I'll get your thoughts on this. Here we go.
If we do not see that God is in this because God is in everything, God dispensed this because God dispenses everything. If we don't see this, then everything we say downstream from that will blur into humanistic nonsense. And if you doubt what I say, I want you to consider what the true horror of this last week was. What was the worst event of this last week? It was not the collapse of the World Trade Towers. It was not the bombing of the Pentagon. The worst event of this last week happened in Washington, D.C., when a polytheistic worship service was organized in the National Cathedral, and it was presided over by a lady bishop. This polytheistic worship service invoked the God of the Muslims and the Hindus and the Buddhists and who knows what else. And the leading evangelical spokesman was there and lent his approval, gave his approval to this.
There you go.
There
you go, friends.
Bizarro world. What the crap?
It wasn't the towers being hit. It wasn't
the 3,000 people who died.
And by the way, I live in New Jersey. My uncle worked in the World Trade Center. I mean, he got out, luckily, but he was there when the towers got hit. And we had to go to my aunt's house, and we're just waiting, hoping that he was alive because, cell phones weren't very popular then. And the service that was available was down, obviously. And here's Doug, who's like, guys, that isn't the biggest travesty of 9/11. The biggest travesty is that people from different religious traditions came together to hold a prayer service in the National Cathedral, and a lady bishop presided over it, and the leading evangelical representative was part of it. That was the greatest tragedy. That's who Doug Wilson was in 2001. People know this is not like he had some, path to extremism. Doug has always been this way, whether it's slavery or 9/11 or many other topics. That's who this man is. Isn't that wild?
That's it's so disgusting. I don't even understand. I mean, it's really weird being on this side of it because I don't understand, but I also do understand because of the indoctrination and just like the trash theology where you can, for example, like what we're seeing happening in Iran right now. There are white evangelicals cheering on the destruction of Iran and the who knows how many people are going to die because of this war. And they are cheering that on because of what they believe it means for the biblical end times, that Jesus is coming back.
Right. I mean, this is from the Huffington Post. There are reports that military commanders, at least one, if not many more, I've heard rumors of others, telling troops that bombing Iran is part of God's divine plan. This is from the Huffington Post, and this source comes from a website called the Military Religious Foundation, and they have this whole email of someone sending in this email stating, I'm going to read just a little quote from it here. I am rank withheld in our unit. This morning, our commander opened up the combat readiness status briefing by urging us to not be afraid as to what is happening with our combat operations in Iran right now. He urged us to tell our troops that this was, quote, all part of God's divine plan, and he specifically referenced numerous citations out of the book of Revelation referring to Armageddon and the imminent return of Jesus Christ. He said that President Trump has been anointed by Jesus to light the signal fire in Iran to cause Armageddon and mark his return to earth. He had a very big grin on his face.
That is
I'm not sure.
Disgusting.
It is disgusting, but April, are you surprised? Because growing up in that world, I'm not surprised at all.
I literally have a chapter in my book about how Christian nationalists weaponize, manipulating end times eschatology. Like, we saw that in Trump's first term when the white evangelicals, the Paula Whites of the world, were influencing Donald Trump to move the embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem because they believed that would basically be another fulfillment of biblical prophecy. Yep. And that move literally it caused several dozen people to be killed and it caused more unrest because of what that symbolized for Palestinians. And then when Israel was committing their genocide in Gaza, the last few years, there was a lot of people celebrating that too because of what 100%. They believed that meant for the biblical end times. Yes. It is a trash theology. The idea that you could be excited about people dying because you think you might get sucked up to heaven on a get out of death free card is just so selfish at a very base level. But a lot of it is like, there's that quote. I think it's Oliver Wendell Holmes, I think is who this quote was originally attributed to. But basically it's the idea that some Christians are so heavenly minded that they are no earthly good. And that is what you see so often within Christian nationalism is, the ends justify the terrible, deadly means.
100%. I mean, I not to mention this eschatology, which is just a fancy way of saying how the end of the world is going to happen, is a new theology in Christian history. Yeah. Most of our modern understanding, especially in America, of how the end times are going to happen, think like rapture, left behind, Armageddon, World War III or IV, whatever it's going to be, comes from a guy named John Nelson Darby, who was in the 18th, 19th century, who developed this term called dispensationalism. And that's kind of where this stuff branched out of. And so it's not even like this is an ancient Christian doctrine that we're seeing. It's a new, very much American industrial complex way of seeing the world. Because think about it, right? Our military is at almost $1 trillion budget. It trumps dozens of countries' entire GDPs. There's a military industrial complex that needs to be fed. Needs to be fed. We need to make bombs. We need reasons to make bombs. We need reasons to develop technology, right? And when you combine that with God has given us a right to do this. This is how we usher in the end of the world. It's a culture of death. It's a culture of death. The fact that we have people like John Hagee, for example, who cheer on the ongoing genocide of the Palestinians, or commanders in our military saying, fear not, this is part of God's plan to usher in the end of the world, while children, school-aged children in Iran were killed from bombs dropping on their heads. You can't tell me that's a pro-life ethic. You can't tell me that is a global God of all things ethic, because what it says is that some people are not fully human, right? They are less than. They are just expendable. They are just casualties of war. So we can get what we want, which is this utter abomination of an interpretation of how we think the world's going to end.
Yeah. Not to mention the hypocrisy that a lot of these people have such intense Islamophobia, and they hate Muslims, and they think they're all extremists, but they will point out the, Islamic terrorists, like the extreme Muslims out there, as being terrible human beings because they're willing to kill for their God.
Yes.
While our version are just Christian extremists that are doing the exact same thing.
I had this epiphany probably a few years ago. I'm sure you did too, where I'm like, wait a second. I've heard about all this talk of, terrorism and extremism and, radical Islam. But I grew up in an environment where I sang songs like, I'm in the Lord's army. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. I grew up in an environment.
Onward Christian soldiers.
Yes. I grew up in an environment that introduced me to talk radio, where I was taught that we're fighting evil overseas. I was on the other side of that radicalization that can lead to this idea that we're in a holy war, which, by the way, Doug Wilson believes. Pete Hegseth believes. People in our military believe. It's only going to cause more chaos, more death, and more destruction. And that's why you and I are so outspoken about Christian nationalism, because it's a culture of death. It's a culture of death for so many.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So
we're going to get back to Dougie.
Yep, because it ties into all this, right? So Doug Wilson, we know that he, at a minimum, whitewashes slavery. He has no problem saying things about 9/11 that are absolutely ridiculous. And he also has some stuff to say about women. Shocker alert. Are you surprised? I know.
Whew.
I'm going to blow your mind. I want to play this clip that kind of went viral because CNN...
Weird Christian shit.
That was an accident.
It works, though. I think it falls under the category still.
I did not mean to hit that button, but I guess you're right. So Doug Wilson was interviewed by CNN a year ago, and I think that this past Sunday there was an expose from CNN that kind of updated people on this. But this is from an older time, I think 2025. I want you all to hear how Doug Wilson talks about women right off the bat. I mean, this is recent. This is not 2001. Yeah. This is 2025.
Women are the kind of people that people come out of.
So you just think they're meant to have babies? That's it. They're just a vessel.
No, it doesn't take any talent to simply reproduce biologically. The wife and mother, who is the chief executive of the home, is entrusted with 3 or 4 or 5 eternal souls.
Okay. This is one mild take from Doug about what he thinks about women. In his other books, Doug has written that, and I hate to say this, makes me feel so cringy, but essentially men are called to dominate and, impart their seed, and women are called to be submissive and open up and receive it.
Gross. Well, and
Yeah, it is
that's
gross.
Doug Wilson being somewhat tame because
Right.
he knows he's in front of a secular audience.
Yes.
And he's still being misogynistic AF.
On his YouTube videos, he comes out and says that women are primarily made to make the sandwiches and have babies. That's what he believes, which is why Doug Wilson, like many others in this world, believe that the 19th Amendment must be repealed. And this is why this is important to see the through line. We talked a lot about Ali Stuckey, toxic empathy, but what most people don't know is that the first person to talk about empathy being toxic or sinful was actually Joe Rigney. Joe Rigney comes from the Doug Wilson world. He wrote a book called The Sin of Empathy a few years ago. Joe Rigney was one of the co-founders of the church in Minneapolis that had a pastor who was also an ICE agent. Okay? So this is like, there's all these little connections that most people don't know about, but it's all tied into it. So this sin of empathy, toxic empathy mantra, even if like an Ali Stuckey acolyte listens to Ali, she'll hear echoes of what Doug is saying, but in their language for her audience. Because Doug absolutely believes that empathy is sinful, that women are too emotional to lead or to vote, and that we have to go back to a one vote per family situation, which aka
household voting.
Yeah, household voting, which means to repeal the 19th Amendment. And this is something that Doug wants done. Like him and his crew, including Pete Hegseth, they're on board to make that happen as soon as possible.
Yeah. Which is why you and I, when Pete Hegseth was at his confirmation hearing, you and I were upset that nobody in that hearing questioned Pete about his ties to Christian nationalism. Because Christian nationalism has dire consequences, as we are seeing right now unfold in Iran. Like the foreign policy that is connected to when you have a bunch of people that want to bring on the end of the world because of what they think that means for them and their religion, that is extreme and dangerous.
Do you feel like, April, that people like you and I are almost like prophets, so to speak, where we keep predicting this stuff over and over, and then people go, I don't get it. How did this happen? It's like, guys, again, you're so right, April. The fact that not one sitting congressperson talked about Doug Wilson when they examined Pete Hegseth is crazy. And look, I wrote about this when this first dropped. I'm happy that CNN is talking about this. It's a good thing. But my God, like, they're a couple years too late, because guess what? The damage is already done. Pete Hegseth is in power. Doug Wilson is discipling Pete Hegseth. We're watching what could be the beginning of World War III taking place, and commanders under Hegseth's leadership are saying it's part of God's divine plan. This is the scenario that you and I and many others have been warning against for so long. And it feels like sometimes we're just speaking into a void where the people who need to listen just don't have the eyes to see it or the ears to hear it. It's frustrating.
Well, and I do think, and we've talked about this before, but I think mainstream secular media has not wanted to touch Christian nationalism because they don't want to appear like they are going against Christianity, that they are just being anti-Christian, because that is part of the Christian nationalist playbook. You call them out for being dangerous or for having harmful theology, they turn around and play the persecution card and say, well, you're just attacking me for my faith. You're
100%.
anti-Christian. You hate God. You are being used of Satan. And that card has historically worked in our nation because we are a majority Christian nation, population, as far as like the most people and religion, like the most, the majority of people who claim a religion do claim some form of Christianity, including in our Congress and in the history of all of our presidents have claimed some form of Christianity.
And white evangelicalism is probably the most powerful segment of Christianity in America, right? And I think, so let me just say this first. The data breaks down where essentially 30% of Americans either are Christian nationalist adherents or they are what's the other term?
Sympathizers.
Thank you, sympathizers. It's about like 10% adherents. Think Charlie Kirk. Think like your Matt Walsh types, right? Your Doug Wilsons, and then the rest are going to be sympathetic to the idea, but they're not going to necessarily storm the Capitol building next week, right? Mm-hmm. And the rest are either rejectors or skeptics. So you're right, because here's what happens, right? The average person going to church in white evangelical churches doesn't think about things probably how Doug Wilson thinks about them. Okay, they're not thinking about end of the world, Iran directly, right? They have to get primed by their pastor for that. However, if there's a perception from folks like Doug Wilson or Ali Stuckey that they are under attack for their faith, that will trickle down into the evangelical culture and then believed by its sympathizers or by its congregants, right? And that's what makes it so dangerous, is because these people listen to these gatekeepers who, it doesn't matter if CNN was as nuanced as possible about the distinction between Christianity and Christian nationalism. It wouldn't matter, because Ali Stuckey and Doug Wilson, all these pundits are going to say CNN hates Christians. In fact, people can go watch a video by Isabel Brown, a Daily Wire contributor, who said exactly that. She said, quote, "The media is persecuting Christians because CNN is releasing this documentary on Christian nationalism." So that's why I tell people, it doesn't. We have to stop trying to play footsies with extremists. Like, let them go, let them whine, let them scream, because the more you try and coddle them, the more you give into them, the worse it becomes, right? And we have to ignore them and just move on and call it out for what it is. We just have to.
Yeah, and I do think it is important for Christians who are not nationalists, like you and I, who maybe are a little more progressive, to call this out.
Yes.
Especially because the teachings of Jesus, as we've said many times, is a kryptonite to Christian nationalism.
Yes.
Because there is nothing nationalistic about the Sermon on the Mount or the Beatitudes. Like, it is very much Christian nationalism is anti-Christ at a 100%. Very baseline level. Any an objective reading of Scripture would come away with that fact.
That's why we do this show. That's why the new Evangelicals exist, right? To help people find a better path forward in faith. Like, this is why we do this work, because I hate to be doom and gloom, but like, this is only the beginning for Christian nationalism. Like, in their mind, they just got power. Like, they're just starting their reign here, right? And we've already seen in a year and a half, less than, how dire America has gotten underneath their rule, from ICE agents to killing civilians to people dying in detention centers. Our transgender neighbors in Kansas overnight getting their driver's licenses erased because they're trans, like all kinds of stuff. And of course, this war. So it's really important to call it out and to critique it. Okay, one more thing I wanted to highlight about Doug, and then we can keep going here. I just think it's important, is Doug also, and this is a very common pattern in evangelicalism, they love to protect abusive people. They love it. I don't know what it is. I don't know why. I don't know the psyche, but there's a pattern where powerful leaders get protected, or they protect people that do abhorrent things. Trigger warning, this section includes mentions of child sexual abuse. Okay, we'll try and be as I guess PG as we can be, but this is part of the story. So a very infamous story of Doug Wilson, again, a man discipling Pete Hegseth, is the case of Stephen Sittler. Stephen Sittler, I'm going to just kind of give the TLDR, then I'll kind of read from this. But Stephen Sittler was a man who was part of Doug Wilson's school, New Andrews St. College, where he reportedly, I'm going to say the word assaulted here, but you can fill in the blanks, assaulted 25 children inside of Wilson's denomination. And he was determined by medical professionals to be a fixated pedophile. Which means that he's at high risk to reoffend. He also received a lifetime sentence. Okay, this guy received a lifetime sentence, but he was released early in May 2007 with lifetime probation status. Now, here's where things get crazy, because again, don't forget, this person was inside of Doug Wilson's denomination. He attended the church. He attended the school. In 2011, Doug Wilson officiates the wedding of Stephen Sittler, being married off to a young woman who was a member of the church. The couple only had 2 dates, and he proposed to her in 2 dates, okay? And then in March 2015, Katie Sittler had a baby, and this is where it gets really evil. Steven Sittler, in a couple months later, admits under a polygraph that he is stimulated by his infant son, which caused a judge to issue a lifetime, you can only see your kids with supervision for life. Doug Wilson married off that man and defends that decision to this day. Defends that decision to this day. And
Isn't there a video of him saying that he is a lover of pedophiles or something? A friend.
Yeah, yes, a friend. Yeah, and the twisted logic goes like this. Well, Christ was a friend to sinners, so I'm a friend to, pedophiles. Of course, the gap here is that when you have someone who is a pedophile, you want to reduce their chances of them ever reoffending, because the damage they do is life-changing to their victims. So you need to use wisdom. There have to be consequences. There has to be, professional intervention by licensed clinical psychologists and judges who know this stuff. You don't just let someone off the hook and marry them off to a woman on their second date and think everything is hunky-dory. That's not, especially for this particular topic, right? This is such an egregious violation of human dignity, right? It's such an egregious violation of someone's autonomy that you want to do everything you can to make sure that this person never has access to children again. Instead, Doug marries him off in his church to a woman on the second date, and then he admits to, with his infant son.
It's gross.
And Doug defends it. These are the people that are animating the theology and the politics behind the Pentagon and much of what's happening inside the White House as well. Because don't forget, April, now that I'm thinking about it, Landon Schott, remember Landon Schott, the Mercy Culture pastor? We covered this a few episodes ago. He bragged that he went to visit Robert Morris in prison. For those who don't know, Robert Morris was a megachurch pastor. He was on Trump's Spiritual Advisory Council. He was caught decades later of molesting a 12-year-old when he was 21 in the 80s. He built a huge megachurch hiding this from people. And he was finally convicted and put in prison for, I think, a few months. And Landon Schott visits him in prison and posts about how God has forgiven Robert Morris. So essentially, we must forgive Robert Morris as well. And that's what mercy and grace means. That's what mercy culture means. And I'm like, there's a pattern here. There is a pattern here. Oh, yeah. Why? It's crazy.
But also the pattern is that evangelicalism and conservatism in general too is the only group that will welcome abusers and pedophiles and people that have just done egregious things into their community, to be redeemed. This happens over and over again. Look at Russell Brand.
Yeah.
Russell Brand has an active conviction or trial going on in the UK right now for rape.
Yes.
And he is now a poster child of evangelicalism. There's videos of him baptizing people.
Yes.
He's spoken at Turning Point events. Look at what's that actor's name that what's his name? Is it Jonathan Majors?
That he's now going over to the Daily Wire.
Yeah, he literally had I think it was assault allegations, but his career was canceled because bad things. Are you gonna fact check me?
Yeah, no, he was okay. He was the guy in Marvel. He was Kong. Is that his name? Is that the name? Yeah, I know who he is.
Hold on, I'll fact check this real quick. I don't want to say the wrong thing.
He has, on December, this is according to Wikipedia, December 18th, 2023, following his harassment and assault conviction, Marvel Studios announced that they would be parting ways with Majors. Yeah, he was eventually set to appear in Avengers the Kong Dynasty. Daily Wire picked him up?
Yes, he's starring in a new movie for the Daily Wire. Let's see.
I gotta read this.
What is the name of the movie? Also joining the cast. I saw someone say that they're calling it the non-woke sinners or something.
Oh my gosh, dude.
I don't know if that's true. I haven't seen that from the thing. I just saw someone tweet that. But regardless, the point is the conservative bubble takes problematic people and welcomes them with open arms.
Okay.
And I do.
Sorry. Can I ask you a question? If you
Yeah.
had to guess, because I have it here, the plot tease, if you had to guess a plot tease that the Daily Wire would be producing, do you have any kind of like, what are some of the themes that you might expect? And like a very stereotypical, MAGA Daily Wire
Probably
kind of movie.
like rah men, patriarchy, anti-woke, fighting leftists and communists.
Okay, you ready?
Uh-huh.
Here's the plot tease. Quote, when threats strike the heart of the homeland, American warriors rise with unbreakable grit and unrelenting firepower to defend what makes this country worth fighting for.
Oh my gosh. Well, and so I think someone was saying, I saw a
So
video
unoriginal.
that Jonathan Majors showed up to his hearing back when he was convicted with the Bible. And so he's now claimed, I believe that he's converted as a Christian now. So he's being redeemed by the Daily Wire. But this happens over and over and over again, too, where you have really terrible people that have this quote unquote conversion to Christianity. And then they are immediately thrown into the spotlight because of who they are, because now they have a testimony, and the testimony is valuable. But we have also seen time and time again that a lot of these people don't actually change. They've just found the one place where they can go and be welcomed despite all the terrible things that they've done in the past, and they can grift on a whole new group of people.
Yeah, so the Jonathan Majors, he admitted to battering his ex-girlfriend in an audio recording that was obtained and published by Rolling Stone, including, being strangled. There's a jury convicted Majors of misdemeanor assault and harassment. Jabari, that's the ex, described how Majors struck her in the head with an open hand, twisted her arm behind her back, and broke her middle finger by squeezing it.
Oh, gosh.
And here he is getting ready to fight the bad guys in a Daily Wire production. Ben Shapiro is a fool. That man that's the guy who brought Candace Owens on his network, who's now trying to blow up the entire MAGA world. Has he not learned his lesson? Dude, don't bring in problematic people into your organization and try to hail them as heroes.
But I do think part of that is that the right does not have a lot of star power. That's why they keep platforming Kid Rock. That's the best they can get.
Totally, dude. And
so the second they're like, oh, this famous celebrity was canceled by the left. Oh, we can have him now. Come over here.
Which is so funny because aren't they the ones always talking about how bad Hollywood is and how Hollywood's full of scummy people? But the second an ex-Hollywood A-lister comes over, oh, come on in. Look who we got, everyone. Look how important we are. I don't want to I don't want to disparage it too bad, but they're just they're like the copycats. They know that they are not cool enough to be at the cool kids table, so they make fun of the cool kids table, but then celebrate whenever someone from that table comes over to theirs as a major win.
Yeah.
Come on.
As someone from that world, I always got excited when I found out that someone was like, oh, they're a Christian. They thanked God.
Yeah,
I would always read the CD little covers and see if they thanked God.
Same.
And
You
did
did that
God,
too?
I could use that to convince my parents to allow me to buy their CD. Because I'm like, Mom, they're Christian. Look, they thanked God. And
I thought I was the only one.
Thanked Jesus, and so that's why I was allowed to listen to NSYNC.
That's 3 tiers higher than God. Jesus, that's specific.
Yeah,
I do the same thing. I'd be looking through, just thank God one time so I can feel good about this. God, it is what it is. But I don't know the Daily Wire, man. They've had so many loser movies. All their movies have come out have not done that great or have been totally ripped apart.
Oh. You know what? I will say Beecher has been talking about wanting to come on here and do deep dive into Christian movies and why they're so bad.
We got to do it.
But I will say, we've talked at length on this because even when I was very evangelical, I didn't love Christian movies because they're just kind of cheesy. But the reason why conservative and, more Christian films are just not good is because they lack nuance.
Yeah.
Most of the characters are very stereotypical. They're one-note characters.
Yep.
It's a very black and white ideology. You either have good people or you have bad people. And the reason why they suck is because that's not realistic. Most people are very nuanced. There's not really true good people or true bad people. You have a bunch of complicated human beings that are trying our best out here. And that is what is missing in conservative films.
April, can we might get demonetized. I don't care. Can we watch the God's Not Dead trailer?
Which one?
In God We Trust, the newest
there's
one.
Like 5 of them.
No,
Sure.
I know, but I think we just have to. I mean, we're on the topic. It takes a minute. I think our audience needs to see. This is a real movie trailer from the. How many are there? There's like 5 or 6 of these God's Not Dead movies.
Good. I stopped after the first one because it was so bad. I was an evangelical, and I went and watched.
I've never seen one of them.
I saw it in the theater.
Couldn't do it.
And I remember walking away being like, that was terrible. I clocked the propaganda when I was still in the propaganda world,
I love that. Friends, there's a good chance that we're going to get demonetized for doing this. So if you want to super chat us and help us out, that'd be great. No pressure.
So this one was the 5th one, and it came out in 2024. So this is the most recent one. Looks like there's 5.
If we ever forget that we're one nation under God, then we will be a nation going under.
Now more than ever, Christians must realize that we are being called to deliver hope to a country that's feeling hopeless.
Sorry, fail on that. So far, you guys are failing.
Yeah, big loss.
Yeah.
It begins where your comfort zone ends. We need to step out into that faith.
We're 6 weeks out from Election Day, and a lot of folks have lost hope in the future of our country.
We must maintain a wall of separation between church and state. Religion has no place in the public square.
Once they bankrupt our country, they will have complete control.
Where did we go wrong, Lord?
We need someone who can light a fire in the voters.
The preacher. He helped on those education hearings.
I've been hired to manage your campaign for Congress.
I'm not a politician.
If you don't take on this fight, we could lose everything.
Sorry, that is such an evangelical trope that if we don't get our guy elected, America's gonna fall apart and we're gonna be put in prison within months of the election happening. Like
the slippery slope.
This is playing on every trope.
It's the reason I cried both times when Obama won, because I was like, "Oh, socialism is here. I've lost the country. The country's gone."
Imagine like writing a movie where the stakes are life and death over an American election. Which, I mean, by the way, they are death on the other side with Trump. You know what I'm saying? Like it's just God. Okay,
right.
Back to the movie.
Want to run against you? Are we worried about a preacher?
My next guest is a candidate for Congress.
Mike
You're going to
Huckabee.
get a lot of questions about your faith.
Well, maybe people are looking for more spiritual and moral leadership in Washington.
You're making God an easy target for them, Pastor.
God's not the target, Lottie. Our country is. God's just standing in their way.
I will not be made a fool of. I won't stop until your moral high ground crumbles beneath your feet.
You don't win unless you play by their rules.
I feel like I have 2 options. I can either do the things my faith asks me not to, or I lose this race.
It's like God keeps putting these impossible mountains in front of me. Perhaps God put those mountains in front of you to show that they can be moved.
Let's pray for David, guys.
This has not aged well.
Oh my gosh. So for those who can't see, they just put Michael Tate on the screen.
Oh, no.
A man who used to lead the Newsboys, who had decades and dozens of sexual abuse allegations thrown his way by many people. Yeah, I feel like the movie is like, again, confessing what it actually is doing, you know, like it's this whole idea of like what happens when you're surrounded by darkness. Yeah, you had Michael Tate in your movie. Good question, guys. You should ask yourself
I wonder
that.
if Newsboys were in every movie, because they were in the first film too. Like that was like the huge climax of the film was the Newsboys concert, and God's Not Dead was a Newsboys song that I think they wrote for this film.
It went viral. Okay, well, so far this is a failure of a trailer.
Yeah.
This contest is about shaping the future of our nation.
Keep your boy in line. It's like his God. I can give it, and I can take it away.
How do you know it's God?
Reverend Hill, your beliefs are a textbook example of Christian nationalism.
Whenever anyone of faith promotes a policy that you don't like, you label them a Christian nationalist.
So bad.
Pause. That is literally what we were just saying that they do earlier. Because I would say the majority of people that adhere to Christian nationalism in some way are like that guy.
Yeah,
where
totally.
they think they're just standing up for quote unquote biblical truth, which is not biblical truth. There is no one biblical truth in the Bible. There are multiple worldviews. They twist scripture to justify their quote unquote biblical truth. So that's what they're talking about. It is a very narrow view of scripture that is not in a historical interpretation in many facets of the theology.
This is the propaganda, though, that you see, because your youth group is going to go to this movie and see it. Like, this is a youth group outing movie. You go see this.
And now you have people trained to, if they get called a Christian nationalist for promoting Christian nationalist things, they have now been trained that, Christian nationalism is just something the left says when they don't like Christianity.
Yeah, exactly.
So now they have internalized that belief that Christian nationalism is just Christianity, which is a tactic that Christian nationalists use to co-opt Christianity and American evangelicalism. And that is why it can be so difficult to stop because of how it tries to, it hides in plain sight of American evangelicalism, but it is not it's not Christianity. It's not what the church fathers. It's not what they intended when they created they chose the books of the Bible. It's not what Jesus intended. Jesus never talked about our modern idea of church. It was just where 2 or 3 are gathered. It was house churches. It was community within your neighborhood. That was the idea of Christianity, not what it has turned into in America today.
100%. 100%.
We need to stand up. Send the message to Washington. Tell them you're not ready to give that power up. You have the power to change things. Not me, not him, you.
In God we trust.
And without God, democracy will not and cannot long endure.
You know what's so funny about that trailer now, watching it again a year later, is that I would love to see like an accurate version of what they're actually doing. Like, please find a Trump-like figure, show him as sexually assaulting women, show him lying, show him doing things behind people's backs, show him do all the bad stuff, and then put him on the debate stage and have the pastors rally around him as the person bringing American values and God back to the country. Because that's what's happening.
Reporter asking him a question, quiet piggy.
Yeah, exactly. Like yes, this is the propaganda, right? This is how people get indoctrinated into believing that Trump is the good guy because they watch movies like this and they think that Trump is the guy in the movie who is fighting for biblical values. Oh my gosh, like it's so thick, it's so stereotypical, as if leftists aren't Christian. Many progressives are Christian. We are Christian.
A good majority of Democrats in Congress are also Christian. Yes. Joe Biden is a Christian.
A more devout Christian than Trump is.
He goes to church.
Yeah, he went to Mass, I think, pretty consistently during his presidency. So, oh man. Anyway, friends, I don't know. This is just a crazy world that we're living in. So,
Anyway, Doug Wilson has access to power through Pete Hegseth, who has access to power via Donald Trump and the Department of War, and it needs to be called out.
Yeah.
For the shoddy theology that it is.
That's the thesis of today's episode. So thanks so much, friends, for hanging out with us. Please make sure to give this video a like. Subscribe to the channel. If you're listening on podcast, thank you so much. Make sure to give the show a rating and a review. If you're looking for a better path forward in faith, check out the new Evangelicals. It's a nonprofit that is run by Melinda Hale that is full of free resources to help you find that better path forward. It's the organization that produces this podcast and this show. So we're all linked up together. It's a great resource. Check out TNE Connect for the community side. So, all right, friends, that's all I got. How about you, April? You good?
I'm dandy.
Sweet. Well, I'm Tim Whitaker.
I'm April Ajoy.
We'll see you Thursday live at 12 o'clock Eastern.
Yeah.